Do you hear my speakers back through my mic?
No.
That's good.
Oh no, where'd it go? There it goes.
I did well, I've done several webinars this winter, but it really makes a difference when people, if they can, leave their cameras on, because then you feel like you're talking with people. Even they nod or whatever. But
Yeah.
I did one recently. It was just all black screens with their names only, and I think I became more and more like monotonous because it's just like talking to a blank screen. So I'll encourage people to have
That's good.
screens on, and we can also, unless we end up with a really huge number, we can take questions as we go so that it seems a little bit more interactive.
That sounds good. I might turn my video off for a minute or two at occasional points as I eat some dinner while we're doing
Yeah,
this.
absolutely.
And Matt, are you going to present first, or Becca,
Yeah,
are
it'll
you?
be me and then Becca.
Okay. All right. Almost 6. We'll wait another minute or two for people to trickle in. Thank you, everyone who got here a little early or on time. It's always nice to say hello early in the game. Now I've got 6 o'clock on the dot. So I'm going to get started and just kind of go through an introduction of what we're doing tonight, and get everything rolling. So tonight's workshop is climate record keeping, market channel. Oh, it's not climate record keeping, market channel risk assessment. It is point of sale data collection, and it's not February 19th. So hopefully I have the right rest of the slides, and if not, that should be the only thing that is wrong. It's just the date and the name of the workshop. I'm Emily. I'm the Technical Assistance Manager at New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. We're going to do a quick tech check. You can rename yourself and add your pronouns in the participant box. You can add to the chat what's your name, your pronouns, your farm name, and where you are located so we can get to know each other. Please mute yourself until the Q&A session. If you do have questions as we're going along, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask. We like getting questions as we're going along because it helps us gauge where you're at and if we're giving out helpful information. The session is recorded. We will end the recording at the end before the Q&A session. So the Q&A will not be recorded, but everything else will be. If you are in need of closed captions for this, I believe through your settings under more, you can click on captions and turn them on. And these sessions, again, are recorded. We would love if you put your video on because it helps us to be able to talk to somebody and see if your faces look very lost or if you are nodding along and smiling or anything like that. It's nice for us to be able to see other people. So that would be great if you could do that. So a little bit about New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. Our mission is to improve our local and regional food systems by training the next generation of farmers. We are training them to grow food that is sustainable, nutritious, culturally appropriate, and accessible to all individuals. We're located in Beverly, Massachusetts, which you can see is kind of in the middle of Middlesex and Essex counties. And we are on ancestral, traditional, contemporary, and unceded lands from the Pawtucket and Massachusetts traditional territory. We have 3 different program areas. We have farmer training. We have our New Entry Food Hub, which distributes food that our new farmers and incubator farmers grow. And then we have our New Entry National Incubator Farm Initiative, which does things on a national level. Tonight, we're in the farmer training section. In our farmer training, we provide courses such as Explore Farming, Farm Business Planning, and crop productions. We also host all sorts of different workshops throughout the year on different topics such as food safety, direct marketing, record keeping, or like tonight's workshop, we're talking about data and your point of sale systems. We also, as part of our farmer training, run an incubator farm, which provides technical assistance, land, equipment, and a food hub for new farmers. I was part of the incubator farm for 3 years, and it was really, really great. You get to learn a lot, get assistance from people who really know what they're doing, and get to be surrounded by a lot of other beginning farmers, which is really helpful when you are just getting started. Our next upcoming course is our crop production course. It's an 8-week online workshop starting in the spring. There is an online portion and an optional in-person portion. And we are revamping it this year to make it more fancy and prettier and a little more modern. So it should be really good. Ben is the main instructor for it. Ben's been teaching a lot of our courses for years now, and he is a really great instructor. So if you're trying to learn more about crop production, I would highly suggest looking into this. We're also currently doing a benchmarking study, so you can get paid to share your financial records. We're recruiting small scale veg, flower, and herb farmers that have 2+ years of growing experience. And we're doing this study to help farmers improve their farm business management and record keeping practices, to compare their performance against other producers at similar scales and enterprises, and develop strategies for farmers to increase their profitability. It's a really interesting study. There's a lot of information that the USDA has about large corn farmers or soy farmers or cattle farmers, but a lot less data. They have a lot less data on what small farmers are doing. So we're trying to start filling in these knowledge gaps so that we can help small farms be more financially sustainable and hopefully successful. If you're interested in partaking in this study, you do get paid to share your financial records. You can drop your email address in the chat or contact me at emily.round@tufts.edu. We have a YouTube channel where you can take a tour of our virtual campus, or a virtual tour of our not virtual campus. And that's actually me pictured there with the 3 farmers growing with new entry. And you can view all of our other workshops that we've done and recorded and learn a little bit more about other farming courses. This is part of a 6-part workshop series. This is the final workshop in this series on record keeping and how record keeping can make your farm more climate resilient. We have a bunch of different resources from all the workshops we've done on our website. If you go to the resources tab under the Farmer Resource Library and click on climate record keeping, you'll see the records for all of the past 5 workshops, and we'll have the resources, from this workshop coming up usually a week or 2 after the workshop is done. Then the fun part, our workshops are funded through grants. And so there will be a poll before and after the workshop. I'm going to pull up the poll for this workshop. They are very fast and very easy. Doing this helps us make sure that we are teaching things or helping people out and seeing if our workshops are actually working. So please fill them out. There'll be another workshop, or not another workshop, another survey that pops up in a web browser after the workshop is done. It is very helpful for us to know how you feel about the workshop after the workshop, so we know if you've learned anything, if we need to add anything into the workshop, if it was relevant to you, and really helps us to create more helpful workshops going forward, and also to, if there's any gaps, fill in those gaps. So please, please, please fill them out. Again, these workshops are free, and they're free because we do things like take surveys. So I'll leave that open for a bit for everyone to answer. And again, I'll remind you at the end, please fill out the end survey afterwards. It really does help us out. And since I pulled up the wrong slideshow, again, tonight's session is not market channel risk assessment. It is the point of sales data collection and using that data to make decisions on your farm. Matt LeRoux is one of our first presenters. He's really great. He's done all of the research to find the answers that you've probably not even thought to ask yet about selling crops or veg at farmers markets, and is really well educated on this. We have another speaker tonight, Becca. Her slide's not going to show up because I pulled up the wrong slideshow, but Becca is also great. She runs a farm in New York and is going to share her experiences as a farmer using the data from her point of sales systems to make some changes on her farm, and let us know how that is. So thank you to our funder, Northeast Extension Risk Management Education. And again, the surveys help us get funding for this, so please fill out the surveys at the beginning and the end. And thank you all for coming tonight. I'm excited to do some learning, to hear what you guys are interested in learning about, and yeah. So I'll stop my screen share. And if you haven't yet, please introduce yourself in the chat. I'll introduce myself too. If you come up to any weird like technical problems as we're going through, just let us know in the chat. Like if for some reason you're not seeing the slides, or if the volume turns off, which, you know, sporadically these things happen and we just don't realize it's happening. And again, also feel free to ask questions as we're going along. Just unmute yourself and let us know what you're curious about. So I'll hand it off to Matt. He'll present first, and then Becca will present afterwards.
All right, thanks. Glad to have the chance to talk about this. This is a topic that I've always been super interested in, and finally managed to get the funding to do some research, and glad to share those results. Also want to say, can't do two things at once. Let me get this set up there. That Becca, not only is Becca a farmer who uses POS data for her own decision making, but she also piloted this research with me back in 2018 as the manager of the Ithaca Farmers Market. So Becca's been along for the ride this whole time doing this research. But yeah, I'm going to talk about research that we've been doing where we collect point of sale data, which I'll explain what that is in a moment. And the goal was looking at farmers market sales and trying to improve sales in that channel, because it's, we all know it's a time consuming channel. And there's certain factors that are outside the farm's control, like the weather or the market hours or the number of vendors. So we really came at this question of, how can we improve sales at the farmer's market by looking at factors that are within the farm's control. And so that's got to do with your stall and your inventory, but also what you can learn from your customer behavior. And that's where, POS comes in as a great resource. So I'm just gonna dive in. POS is point of sale. So it's a software that it's just like a cash register that you can load on an iPhone or an iPad, and then you can use it at the market. So, I first learned about the Square. I'm going to talk mostly about Square, which is just one company's POS. There are other POS systems, but Square is free, and it's the one that we chose to use for our research because it has really good detailed data export. But I first learned about it from this picture right here. I was at a farming conference up in Maine in 2015, and this farmers market vendor was showing me her Square POS system and telling me how it worked. And that's the first time I knew that those things existed. But I thought, wow, obviously it's banking all of this data. It's got timestamps and date stamps, right? And then the price that you sold the product at and everything else. So I was really excited to see what we could do, and it took a few years to get funding in order to try it. We piloted this research in 2018, and at that time, we're talking about pre-pandemic, most farms in my area were not using a POS system. And if they were, they would say, yeah, that's the credit card machine. And they really were only recording credit card transactions on it. But in fact, you can record all transactions. So it's an app that you can load on tablets and cell phones. It can work offline, so you don't have to have a data plan, where you can be at a farmer's market where there's no reception and still operate it. The only problem with offline mode is if you run a credit card, you won't instantly know that that card is declined. So there's a small chance that, you know, you get a declined card. It's a screen of squares and you just touch them to ring up a customer. So you can see in this picture, kale, you know, and cherry tomatoes. So when the customer grabs a bunch of kale, you just touch that green square, adds it to the total. Cherry tomatoes, you touch that, it adds it to the order, does the math, and then you can check them out. If they're paying with cash, there's no fee. So you can record all your sales as cash if you just want the record keeping and never pay any fees. You can kind of hack its utility to serve your purposes, but you can also process credit cards with it, which is useful. And I think of it as passive data collection. In my years working in agriculture, you know, gathering primary data, gathering data straight from farms is usually onerous because you're asking very busy people to write a lot of things down. And I've done some research with notepads on farms. But what I really like about this is, you know, all you're doing is taking care of your customer and ringing them up. But at the same time, you're creating a data set for yourself. So it's sort of like a passive form of data collection. And then you can export all that data and, you know, use it to answer questions that you have and to sort of create different summaries. So what you record when you check out a customer in Square, like I say, very quickly and easily, is the quantity of the item. The price is not directly in the output, but of course you can divide the quantity by the total spent and come up with the price for each item. It records the units, so some things are sold by the each, like quarts and bags and bunches, and other things are sold by weight. So you can set them up differently. Of course, it totals the customer's transaction for you. It gives a time date stamp to every transaction, and if you program it with locations, which is pretty easy to do, then it will also record your location and then how they paid, card or cash. And there's several other details, but those are the biggies. And then you can export that and start to work with your own data. So, you know, I was thinking of other ways that you can use this besides just looking at your sales. I've got one farm that's using it sort of like a proxy for harvest records. They used to count everything that they brought to the market, and then at the end of the day, count everything that they were bringing back. And now they don't have to do that. And if you want to assume, like, you know, that you sold 90% of the eggplants you brought to market, you can look at the volume of eggplant transactions and you know, figure that's what you harvested. And you can even set it up with who the user is on each device if you really want to, and you can start to compare different staff or members of your family that are selling and see who's doing better. And of course, you can compare locations. We had some fun. We put Becca up against her partner, and because we wanted to see who sells better, Becca or Bill. So we looked at the data because their usernames were programmed in. And I encourage you to find out about Excel pivot tables. If you are going to collect this kind of data, pivot tables are very simple to use, and they give you summaries of huge data sets very quickly and very easily. Just allow you to sort through and look at your stuff in different ways.
So who was the better seller? Was it Becca or your husband?
Well, I was debating when I should reveal that, but I'll say nobody. They're equal, but in different ways.
But different, yeah. Ooh. Equal but different. But it made for good competition, so.
It did.
Yep, still does.
What we found is that Becca has more transactions, but they're a little bit smaller, and Bill, her partner, has fewer but larger transactions. And so it kind of comes out in the wash at the end of the day. And what I like to think, my explanation is that Becca is very friendly and bubbly and approachable. And I think maybe her partner could be a little bit intimidating, but he's really good at selling. So I think, you know, a lot of people will buy a bit more when they start talking to him. That's our theory, right?
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah. But it comes out in the wash because they basically have equal performance. All right, so like I said, you know, seeing this resource, this availability to collect data, but also having done research on farmers market channel performance and finding out that, like I said, farmers markets are time intensive, and the sort of rate of, dollar in sales generated for each hour spent in that market channel isn't strong compared to some of the other market channels like CSA and wholesale that we studied in early research. So the question again became, what can we do to strengthen farmers markets, because they have a lot of value. What are the measurable factors that influence customer spending that we can sort of try to understand and harness? And then, can we increase sales using factors within the farm's control? And another way to look at that, just very practically speaking, because this was my question, is it possible for you just to get more money out of your market? How can we do that? And the way that we're going to try is to look at consumer behavior as much as we can read it from the transactions. So there's an old, I got trained up, I guess, as an ag economist, and the adage around our department from the old timers was, you can't improve what you don't measure. I think old ag economists love to say that, but I wanted to make it positive and say, okay, then you can improve what you do measure. So here's some of the things that we're measuring when we get this data. Some of these things are calculated from the data, but we're looking at customer counts. You can look at customers per hour or customers per market day. Customer transaction size, both in terms of how many dollars they spent with you, but also how many items they're purchasing from you. Daily gross sales, which, hopefully most people keep that record on their own. The average item value became a point of interest. Like, what are the items that we're selling worth? Because that's going to dictate something about customer transaction size. And then item sales, looking at the most popular items. What are the things that are top grossing for us? What are the things that we're selling the most units of? And what are the opportunities from that? So I'm going to share some of those with you. When we look at all these different metrics, we're thinking about where are growth opportunities. And I just like to think about average daily gross sales. So I have it there, ADGS, is really made up of the average number of customers that you have at that market multiplied by the average that those customers spend. So if we want to improve daily sales, we could keep the same average number of customers, but get those people to spend more money with us, and that would give us a better day. Likewise, we could get more customers coming shopping with us and keep them spending the average amount. We'd still have a better day, or ideally bring up both sides of the equation. Get more customers and get the average customer spend to increase using marketing technique. So what are we going to study? We're going to study customer counts, customer spending, and I break customer spending up into a few different pieces. That's the item value, the sort of pack size that we're selling. We're going to look at item counts for customers, and we're going to consider pricing, all as methods to increase customer spending. So this is the setup for the research. 2018, we piloted it with 8 farms. Among the 8 farms, they were doing 16 market days a week. So some of these 8 farms, there was all concentrated in the Ithaca, New York area, where I am and where Becca is. Some of these farms were at the same markets as each other, but each time a farm recorded all their sales at one day at the market, we called it a market day. And that's why we were able to collect 16 market days each week. So we just did this from about June till October 1st that year. So in total, we observed 205 market days. These were all primarily vegetable growers, so they were mostly selling vegetable items. Among the whole group, there were about 20,000 customer transactions, summing up to $128,000 in sales and moving about 38,000 items. I tell you all that just to give you a sense of the size of the data set. It was a significant set. And then we can start to look at some of the metrics from there. So among all these farm market days, farms are seeing about 97 customers per market day. And they were grossing about $631. And that sum of 631 also speaks to the importance of this research back in 2018, because I had done farmers market research in 2009 and 2010, and the average daily sales for some of the same people, some of the same farms, were more like 750. So back in 2018, we were seeing that farmers market sales were declining I was a little doom and gloom at that point. And frankly, the pandemic really boosted sales. I think it was a good thing for local food. So anyway, we were looking at, this 631 was lower than what we had observed almost 10 years earlier. Average customer transaction size with vegetable growers was about 650, and they were buying basically 2 items. And that makes sense because back then, the sort of rule of thumb for vegetables was that every vegetable item was about $3. So it kind of made sense. They were grabbing 2 items and they were spending 650. That's what we were seeing. We got the funding to repeat this research in 2021, and this time we worked with farms that primarily sell meat. Not to say they didn't have anything else, just like the other ones. Some of these farms have maple or honey, or some of these meat farms might even bring a few vegetables to market or mushrooms, but primarily meat selling farms in 2021. We recorded 10 farms. They were spread all around New York State, so not just concentrated in the Ithaca area. And among them, they were recording 27 market days a week. And we did this for almost the entire year, or as much as the farmers markets ran. So we recorded 644 market days. Because they're meat vendors, I think they don't have as many transactions as vegetable growers. So even with those 644 market days, that was only about 26,000 customer transactions compared to 20,000 from the veg study. $670,000 in sales to sell 27,000 items. So that's just an overview of the data size. And now I'll tell you some of the metrics. Farms are seeing about 41 customers at a market. Again, we expect meat vendors to see fewer customers, fewer customer counts than vegetable farms. Daily sales of about $1,000. The average customer transaction size we would expect to be larger because meat's more concentrated value per item. So, customers were spending about $25.50. They were really mostly buying 1 item. And as the math pans out, the average meat item was worth about $24. So all things that you would sort of anticipate, but this is what we saw in 2021. So now I'm going to talk about the results from a regression model, and all that means is a statistical model that that includes several different variables that influence the amount that the customer spends, and it isolates different variables. So we created a statistical model. This is the sort of model where you hear people say, that something was statistically significant. We're really testing our variables for statistical significance and seeing what we can learn from the very large data set. So first thing that we learned was that each passing hour resulted in lower customer spending. So customer transaction size, whatever it was, like let's just quickly jump back. For the meat project, average customer transaction size was $25.46. So what we found here with this negative 35 cents is that customer spending on average dropped 35 cents with each passing hour, and that's a compounding 35 cents. So the first hour of the market is the best spending. The second hour, customers are spending 35 cents less. But the third hour, they're spending 70 cents less, and on down the line, you keep adding. And same goes with the vegetable growers. 20 cents on a $6 transaction, that really, it is kind of a big portion. And again, as it compounds hour after hour, we see that transaction size is shrinking. So when we read a statistic like this, the question is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to improve daily sales. So what's our goal? Our goal is to increase customer counts during the slow times. The easiest gains for popping this number up or improving daily sales is to find ways to gain customers during our slowest hours. Find ways to draw people into our booth when we know it starts to get slow. In other words, during your peak sales time, you don't necessarily want to try to generate more customers, right? It's more like during the slow times that you want to find more customers. So advice, like ways to implicate or to begin doing this, would be to make sure, if we know the first hour is the best hour, arrive and be ready to sell on time, or if there's no rules against it, be ready to sell early. And that's certainly true at the Ithaca market, the one that well, Becca and I are probably most familiar with, the Ithaca Farmers Market. There's not a rule against selling early. And we certainly know anecdotally that the real serious grocery shoppers are at the farmers market before it begins. They want to beat the traffic in the parking lot. They also want the best selection, so they come early, and they're the biggest spenders. When you do, get through your peak in the first hour, take time to spruce up your stall, restock if you're a produce vendor, mist your veggies and bring more out. And then the rest of the time, it's thinking about how to gather more customers during the slower times. One thing that I think would work would be to stay in your booth, smile, make eye contact, perhaps put out samples, or if you really want to, maybe put up signs and start offering special deals towards the end of the market. But I think the main actions here are to set up early to capture more sales, be ready right at the market beginning time or even before. And then later in the market, stay in your booth. And that kind of comes from an anecdote where one of the farms I was working with, I dropped in on their farmers market unannounced late in the market, and I found that their market stall was empty. And I was looking for them, and I was waiting, and I waited like 15 minutes. Certainly, they weren't going to make any sales while their market stall was empty for 15 minutes. So, what's a good way to increase transactions during that time? Maybe be there. This is a graph of a typical single day. This is from a real, one real farm at their market, and this is what we typically see. So before the market begins at 9, if you're not ready to set up, you're missing some sales because there are definitely customers wandering around. Then you get into your first hour, and we're going to call that peak sales. It's graphed out here by the number of customers per 30-minute section. So the 9 is 9 o'clock, 9.5 is 9:30, and so on. It's also, as we saw, the top spending, so it's the peak gross sales. Then there's a little lull, not to say that it's actually super slow, but there is a little lull, and that's the chance to restock and reset your market stall, and then get ready for that next peak. These are the people like me who are slow going in the morning and finally get out the door and down to the farmers market. So there's some more little peak in customers, but you see that they are spending less because the gross sales doesn't really raise up as high as the customer counts. And then the rest of the day, yeah, it's kind of a steady decline, but that's an opportunity to try to engage people that are still walking around your farmer's market, and just like I said, engage them, eye contact, a sample, maybe a new sign or a bright colored sign that you put out later in the market to try to get their attention. This is a very typical graph, even though it's just from one day and one farm. We've graphed out many, and for farms, and they always look a lot like this, especially if they're markets that start in the morning. Sometimes afternoon markets have a little bit of a different pattern and a peak that occurs a little bit later. All right, so the next thing to think about is the customer experience. And what I'm talking about is busyness or lines. And what we found in the data was that for each additional customer in a 5-minute period, customer transaction size, which is customer spending, dropped by 42 cents. And we first found that in the meat project. We didn't study that back with the 2018 vegetable project, but yeah, so that what we looked at is there's a timestamp on each transaction in Square, and we looked 2.5 minutes on either side of that transaction at how many other transactions occurred. And again, statistically over the 26,000 transactions, this is what we found is that on average, that second customer in a 5-minute period spends less. And then as you add more, it's compounding. So the third customer, 84 cents less, and so on. And then when you get really busy, and we define really busy as one standard deviation above the average. So that's the 3.58 customers in a 5-minute period. So I think that's essentially, it's like having 4 customers in 5 minutes. At that point, there's an even more negative impact on their spending. So now they're spending 81 cents less with each additional customer. So when you start to get really busy, at least what we found in 2021, then your customers are going to spend less. And it stands to reason because farmers markets are, they're not a convenient way to shop, but they are unique, and consumers come out to talk to farms. I mean, that's one of the reasons they love coming to the farmers market, to get your recommendation, to, your suggestion, your recipes, to hear about farm life and how it's going, how the season's evolving. So customer interaction is very important. When you get really busy and there's less opportunity for interaction, then they actually begin to spend less. Maybe they're not getting that recommendation from you, and they're just grabbing one item or something like that. So the easiest way to counteract busyness is to have additional staff, at least during your busiest hours. You can also look at designing your market stalls so that the customer checkout is more efficient, and then it will reduce busyness. And I wrote an article about this, and I made this drawing along with some other drawings, just a suggested way to design a market stall so that you have customers flowing through. What's important here is that the checkout stand is at the end instead of in the middle, because up here, upstate, it's still pretty traditional to stick your checkout right in the middle. That means you have customers coming at you from every direction. So you could be helping 3 or 4 or 5 customers all at once because you're accessible from every direction in the middle. And what this does is really create a clear endpoint for the customer. They can review all the products and then come there to check out, and you'll reduce busyness. And this is not my own brilliant idea, but I've seen it at busier farmers markets. This is a market down closer to New York City where they get really big crowds. And this farm has a beautiful display, first of all. But you come in, you walk across that front table, you turn right, go down where you can see the Swiss chard and the heads of lettuce and stuff. And then you come towards what is obviously the place to check out, right? So he can handle a lot of customers really smoothly. And you can see he's got his scale, his iPad on a stand. He's got his cash box, and he has bags to check out his customers. Another feature that I really like about this stall design is that he gives his customers a place to put their stuff down. And as I stood there and watched people put, their shopping bags, their purses, their coffee, they always put something down when they're trying to check out. And I think that's a nice touch. So yeah, I just made a drawing of his market stall.
Hey, Matt, I just wanted to jump in real quick in terms of the busyness, because there were some comments in the chat box about encouraging customers to pre-order. And I think that that's another way you can help, number one, your regular customers, and you can serve them better, but you can also probably reduce the busyness that occurs by encouraging pre-orders for regular customers. So I think for us, that works really well.
Yeah, getting, that's all post-COVID, right? Getting your customers to order online for pickup is, we weren't doing that in 2018, but it's certainly a good idea, and it's accessible, to you. It's the technology is available. So I think that is a great suggestion. Thanks for bringing that up, and thanks for putting it in the chat. If people have questions, you are also welcome to unmute, because I'll be honest, I'm not monitoring the chat, but Becca and Emily probably are. All right, so when it comes to that busyness, part of this research was to find out what's going on and document it, but also to work with the farms that were participants and see if we could help them improve daily sales. So with one particular farm, I'll just say that they're Farm A, we noticed that the busyness really hurt customer spending. In fact, it was hurting their sales more than the project average. So in 2021, their average customer transaction size would drop by $2.19 for each additional customer. And as you saw previously, for the project, it was only 42 cents. This is primarily a meat vendor. So we just saw that, when they got busy, their customer spending was really taking a hit. So we suggested that they add a second staff person during during their busiest time. And they ended up doing that. They're attending mostly 3 markets a week, and they added a second staff person at the busiest farmers market, just that one market, beginning on July 15th. So what we're able to do so far is just compare that same period from July 15th through October 31st of 2022, and then compare that with 2023 when they had the second staff person. And here's what we found. Firstly, something weird did happen in 2022. Their customer density coefficient, which would typically be negative, had turned positive. So even when there was just one person at market, when they started to get busy, those customers were spending about 13 cents more. I can't really explain it. But in 2023, when they had the second staff person, that increased even more positive, up to 69 cents or 70 cents. We also looked at their average customer count in 5 minutes. They were in 2023 with 2 staff people. They were serving more customers in a 5-minute period, an average of 2.6 customers, up from 2.17. Their average customer spending, and this is where, to me, where it starts to get exciting. Their customers began to spend more. So the average customer transaction size in 22 was $21.40, and it went up by a full $2 when they had a second staff person, because there was more interaction with it's really a husband and wife team, so the husband and the wife there. Average DCC means daily customer counts. So they were actually helping more customers during the average day because they had more capacity, and the combination of more customers plus a higher average customer spend resulted in higher average daily sales, which you can see there. And total for that whole period of July 15 through October 31, they had gained about 340 customers. So they were able to take care of more customers, who in turn were spending more because of that second staff. So it felt like that was a really good decision. The next thing that we looked at was payment method, because as I said, Square tells you if they paid with cash or card, and now Square accepts Apple Pay and something else, some other forms of payment. Like you can see here, like the phone. I'm not that technology savvy, so I'm struggling here, but other forms besides just credit cards, which are still really popular. What we found in, I'm going to jump over to 2021 Meet research. We found that when customers paid with a credit card, they were spending $2.28 more than those who paid with cash. And we also found that 57% of all the transactions in the project were paid with a credit card. It makes sense, particularly with meat products, because they're higher value, that you'd see more credit card usage. And comparing 2021 and 2018 is sort of not fair, because 2018, technologically was still a different era at the farmers market. But that's what we were seeing. So the implications, of course, from this research are that you should accept credit cards and EBT, because we also studied other forms of payment. We didn't always know what the other forms were, but they also increased customer spending the way credit cards did. And that you should make sure customers know. And it's really simple, just to make sure you have really clear signage that says that you accept credit cards. And let me give you an example. Once again, from the real world, we looked at this farm's data in 2021, and we saw that 32% of their customers were paying with a credit card, but that was a lot lower than the project average of 57%. So we suggested that they make a sign. Well, first we asked, do you have a sign that says you accept credit cards? They said, no, we do not. I say, okay, well, that's part of why people aren't paying with credit cards, because they don't know. And, customers may even be walking by realizing they don't have any cash on them. So they put up this exact sign, this yellow sign that you see, starting on July 15th in 2023. And then we monitored sales. So again, we compared that period from 2022 to the same period in 2023. The sign was up for 2023, and here's the results. That the contribution above cash payments that credit card payments were making increased by about 25 cents. So with the sign, people knew that credit cards were accepted, and that resulted in larger transactions with credit cards than had happened before. They also had more customers paying with credit cards. A total count of the number of customers that paid with cards for that period increased. The percent of customers using cards increased by 3%, and the average customer transaction size increased. So that's just all customers. But also look at this last column here. Average daily customer count increased from, let's say, about 70 up to 90. So they were getting 20 customers a day that they weren't getting before. And I think that's those people who would have liked to have shopped with them, but didn't know that they could use their card and kept walking. So that's new customers. So once again, I think that making the sign was a good choice. The cost of the sign was, negligible. It's a sheet of 8.5 by 11 taped onto their market stall, and it really had a good payoff. Okay, we also are going to, we're talking about customer transaction size, so let's get into some of the details of transaction size. Here are the averages as a reminder of what we saw in 2018 and 2021. And if we're trying to increase customer spending, we have to sort of dissect customer spending into different pieces. One would be the items that we're selling, the pack size or the item value, which are tied together. The next would be to think about how many items our customers are buying, and then finally to think about our pricing strategy. So product pack size just means that you're creating items that hold more value. So you don't have to do a price increase, but you can make the package size bigger in order to increase the minimum that's possible for someone to spend with you. In other words, we saw one farm in particular in 2018 that was selling heads of garlic for $1.50. And so it meant that it's possible for a customer at the farmer's market to come up to that market stall, to create busyness, right? But only spend $1.50. So they're going to take, some of your time up and possibly decrease other customers' spending while only spending $1.50 with you. But you, as the person who creates the packages, who creates the products, do have some control over what you put out. And so it occurred to us that you could change your product format or your product size in order to increase the minimum that people can spend. And I think that garlic is a good example. Instead of selling them for $1.50 each, you can put up a sign that just says 2 for $3, right? So now people will spend $3. That's better. Or you can put 3 heads into a pint container and say that it costs $4.50. It's not a unit price increase. It's the same price per unit, but you are increasing customer spending by changing your product size. Ultimately, the advice is eliminate low price sizes, low value items. We also found that when customers bought products that were sold by the weight, vegetable products that were sold by the weight, they spent about $1.14 more than the average customer. So there are some crops that make sense to sell by weight, like potatoes maybe, or tomatoes. And in those cases, customers are going to probably spend more than when you sell those things by the each. And it was an interesting revelation in the research, because when we started off 2018 and we were asking farms to record all their transactions, my advice was put everything into the each, right? It'll be faster at checkout. Put your potatoes in quart containers so that you can just, check them out faster. You don't have to put them on the scale. Well, I was handing out really bad advice, it turns out, because when people buy by the pound, they'll tend to spend more. All right, and then we look at the items per customer. So yeah, we were seeing that among vegetable farms, basically customers were buying 2 items, and with meat farms, customers were buying 1. So what's the best way to increase daily sales is try to get your, the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, is to get your 1 item customers to buy a second item, and that will increase their spending. How do you get 1 item customers to buy a second item? Make sure that you do have, all the most popular items that you produce. If that's cherry tomatoes or blueberries or hamburger or jerky, make sure you're stocked well on those popular items. You can experiment with different ways to arrange your market stall. I don't have any advice yet. Do you put certain items right next to your checkout station? Do you put certain items out front where anybody walking by sees them? But you could at least experiment with different ways of arranging your stall, see if that increases item counts. You could try bundling, which is to say, get any 2 items on this table for $7, or get all these items together for $20. Just try some different bundlings or promotions. And finally, what the farms reported anecdotally was that they really had luck getting customers to buy a second item when they suggested it. So just suggesting another item or a pairing that makes sense, like, hey, you're buying onions, do you need some garlic for that recipe, right? Because those things are always so frequently cooked together. or, suggesting, oh, you're buying this, but hey, our blueberries are really good this week. It's peak season. Just suggesting an item. They said anecdotally, they felt that very often their customers took them up on it. And that might be part of that customer interaction, right? Customers want to hear from you. And so one way they'll hear from you is your recommendations. Finally, you could just plain revisit your prices and increase prices. By increasing product prices, you're going to increase customer spending. You're not necessarily going to increase customer counts, but you are going to increase customer spending because they only became a customer when they bought something. You would look at your fast moving and your most popular items, and that's a great opportunity to raise prices. I talk to farms who say, oh, we sell out of eggs in the first 15 minutes of every farmer's market. Well, there's your opportunity to increase prices because, you want to keep your eggs around a little bit longer. Possibly they're underpriced because they sell so quickly. So think about those items that sell really quickly. And I know a lot of times it's nerve-wracking to think about increasing prices, but don't worry that by raising a price, you necessarily, and if you lose some customers to those new higher prices, that you're necessarily going to make less money in the same period. So I just did some basic math here to say, if you were selling lettuce heads for $2.75 each, and you typically sold 200 a month, then you were grossing $550 a month from lettuce heads. If you increase that to $3 a head, you could stand to lose 15 customers who decide that your price is high and they're going to move on. But you'd still be grossing about the same, a little bit more in that scenario, and you could increase your price even further up to $3.50, and you could stand to lose more customers and still gross the same amount. So, if consumers react to higher prices by buying less, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be earning less. And that concept is called price elasticity. It's the consumer sensitivity to price increases and how it impacts their buying. But I think, at farmers markets, you have customers that are, excuse me, not always primarily motivated by price. They're motivated by where they're shopping and the farms, the quality. And so they're probably less price sensitive than, let's say, grocery store shoppers. So keep that in mind. It is simple math, right? Higher prices increase customer spending, but not necessarily average daily sales. If you wind up losing some customers, it could increase it. But I'll just give you this anecdote from 2018. The vegetable farm in our research that year that had the highest prices, and it was pretty clear that their prices were high. They also had the highest customer spending. That makes sense, right? When people did become a customer, they were spending more because of the higher prices. They had the highest item values. That also makes sense with high prices. They were the top grossing farm among all the other vegetable farms. And it didn't hurt their items per customer. So that's something I would have watched. When they raised their prices when they had high prices compared to the others, did people buy less from them? No, people were still buying about 2 items. So it didn't hurt their items per customer. It really just benefited the farm. They were a top performer.
Matt, there's a question in the chat about how many of their customers use Snap.
All right, that's a good question. However, I don't have data on it because the SNAP payments aren't directly processed in Square. Farms that are accepting SNAP are having to use a separate processor, and they'll just record it in Square, for example, as other payment methods. So it's not cash, it's not credit card. We did look at other payment as a variable, and it has a really positive impact on customer spending. In other words, customers who paid with other means besides cash or credit card spent more than those who paid with cash. The problem with the other category is that it includes checks, like I said, Apple Pay, Venmo, whatever else the farm is accepting, that all went into other. And unless the farm made a note, we didn't know. So we couldn't directly study the impact of using SNAP. Thanks for that.
I also just put into the chat if you're interested in taking SNAP. there is a program called MarketLink that can help you fill out the paperwork to do that. They will get on a call with you. I think it's about half an hour and fill out the paperwork with you. And I know a couple of farmers who have done that and they found it very helpful.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's definitely wise to accept because customers do use it, and like I said, it does increase customer transaction size when they are paying with snaps. So it is a good system, and it's just, you know, yeah, some markets have the wooden coin system. There's a variety of methods out there, and you could make a note each time you record those payments in, for example, the Square POS, but you'd have to stop and make that note. Just to wrap up my portion, you know, we're studying this across many farms and markets, and also sharing results with individual farms to try to increase their daily sales. But my advice to anyone, you know, is to go out and use a POS system. Like I said, we liked Square, but there are other systems out there. PayPal has one, QuickBooks has one, and there are some others. But you use them to create metrics, your daily sales, or your markets, and then just choose one that you want to focus on and see if introducing changes at the market could give you positive results. You know, just try different things. Try adding a second person, try putting up a sign. You know, once you have that baseline, then you can begin to experiment and look for opportunities to increase daily sales. That might result in doing things like raising item values, which is your package size, so to speak, and also through pricing. You know, look at what you're bringing to market and what's in demand, experiment with different ways of displaying it, and try to engage customers during the slow times. This could really have an impact on daily sales, and make sure you're ready to get going when the market begins. Just want to quickly add, if anyone on here is from New York, or I'll say near its borders, we are still recruiting farms to participate in this research. It's ongoing. So if you're selling your own products at farmers markets, whether it's meat, dairy, fruit, veg, or fresh cut flowers, mushrooms, all that, and we're looking at all of that, you would have to be using the Square app, because of the data export feature is really good and it gives us the level of detail that we need. But if you participate in our research, you know, we'll create personal reports and offer feedback and advice on how you could increase sales. Like, some of it's very simple. I know, like that farm, we said, hey, you know, consider adding a second person, consider putting up the sign for the credit card acceptance. We'll give you all the statistics on your data, both summary statistics and then your own farm regression, where we regress just your data set. So that gives you all those cool little statistical coefficients. And then we offer one-on-one consulting. So when we give those reports to the farms, we meet with them on Zoom and discuss the results and the opportunities. We learn a lot about your reality at market, and we also can offer what we're seeing based on the bigger data set. What's required is to use Square and to record every single transaction at market, which, you know, again, this is advice. Even if you're not going to participate in our research, you should record all the transactions, not just the credit card payments. At your market, program all your items in with a lot of detail. You know, don't just put root vegetables in as a product, but put in carrots, onions, potatoes, because then you can get that back out when you look at your data. And, you know, submit your data if you're going to participate. We're also going to start very soon here doing USDA farmers market price reports. So we have a contract with USDA to observe different prices at farmers markets. We're doing that through the data collection, and then the USDA will be publishing those reports weekly. If you want to be a participant in that, it's the same as the CTS research, except that we will pay $25 a week for each week that we receive the data. Otherwise, all the requirements are the same. So if you're going to participate in CTS research, you might as well check the box and participate in price reporting and get $25 a week. Thanks to the USDA. And I'll just end there and offer my email, which I'll put in the chat. But, you know, feel free to contact me if questions occur, you know, on this topic at a later date. You know, just go ahead and email me, or if you're interested in participating, please email me. And thanks. I'll pass it over to Becca.
Thanks, Matt. Before we get started with Becca, I thought we could just take a second to see if there's any questions that people have. And I have one question, which is how long does it usually take for somebody to set up Square for their farmer's market?
Becca could answer that better than I could.
I mean, it can be a quick process, and I think there's a certain amount of time it takes to think about and strategize how you're going to set up Square and what data you want to pull out of it in the end. So that'll take a few hours at your computer before you even get to market. And then each market day, you probably, if you have rotating items, you probably want to reset your Square tiles so that it's easy to pick which ones you choose to check people out. But I will say, and I'll talk about this a little bit in my presentation, the amount of time it saves in the end is fantastic. So it makes things way easier, and it makes decision making easier and quicker in the end as well.
Yeah, and I'll offer, you know, the system's as good as you build it, so to speak. So think about your product categories and items, the way that you want to get them back out. And if anyone's not currently using a POS and they want some, you know, advice on how to set up a POS, Becca and I have a recorded webinar on that topic when we talk about creating items and categories and so on. So, you know, my email's in the chat. If you email me, I'll find that link and get it to you.
There was a question in the chat about using Square to send an availability list to take pre-orders. And there is a way to manage inventory on Square. That's not something that I've, you know, taken time to delve into because it doesn't fit our farm model, but there are potential options for doing something like that so that you could take pre-orders that way, I would imagine.
Right,
And the online side of Square is pretty easy to use, right? It's not too bad.
Then another quick question that I had was, is there any information or data that you collected for a while and is found to be either useless or just wasn't relevant, or just you were like, that I spent a lot of time collecting that data and I didn't find a good niche for it, maybe don't focus on trying to collect that one?
That is an awesome question. Yes, in 2018, we recorded the temperature and the rainfall every single day, which every single market day, which was a huge pain in the neck and statistically insignificant. The trend that we saw was that on colder or rainier days, you would get lower customer counts. However, those customers did tend to spend more. Transaction size actually went up. So logically, we thought like people who actually came to the farmers market on bad weather days, you know, they're going to spend a lot of money. That's, you know, they came out for this. it's the diehards. But ultimately, because there are fewer of them, daily sales falls a little bit on bad weather days. I wouldn't advise skipping market on a bad weather day because you're kind of creating an inconsistency where your customers don't know if you're going to be there or not. So I think that's one thing. You know, we've dropped the weather. The other thing we looked at was the county that markets are in, and we looked at the demographics in those counties and the income levels. And, you know, we wondered, are, you know, very wealthy counties, the transaction size bigger? There turned out to only be about $1 bigger. So $1 does matter. It does. But we've so far, you know, we've discontinued that demographic.
Thank you for sharing. If there's any other questions, you can raise your hand or throw them in the chat. And Becca, do you want to get started?
Sure. There we go. So as Matt introduced me earlier and Emily did as well, my name is Becca Rimmell and I own and operate Bottomland Farm with my partner, Bill. We are in Berkshire, New York, which is about halfway between Ithaca and Binghamton. We go to 4 different market days a week during peak season, some in Binghamton and some in Ithaca. And we also do farm to door delivery. So we do that twice a week, year round. mostly to Binghamton and Ithaca areas. We primarily sell pasture-raised meat. So we do pork, broiler chicken, laying hens. As I was telling Emily earlier, we just started an adventure with meat goats and are growing our meat goat herd for the area. And we raise some veggies and some log-grown shiitake mushrooms as well. So we do a little bit of everything here and there, and we focus primarily on direct-to-consumer sales. Now, when I first started working in the food system sector, I started out as a farmer's market manager. And prior to farming, prior to even knowing I wanted to farm, and so I had a lot of opportunity to talk to different farmers and understand what their challenges and what their opportunities were at market. And one of the things I noticed when I first started managing markets over a decade ago is when I asked farmers how they were doing at market, they would be like, oh, I think I'm doing good, you know, but they couldn't really give me a whole lot of concrete answers most of the time. When Square came out and it became, the POS systems became a little bit easier, I saw more and more farmers starting to use those systems. And those were the farms that could adapt based on the data. And those are the farms that could give me concrete answers and tell me how they were doing compared to the previous week and why they thought they were doing better or worse compared to the previous week. So from the beginning of my own farm adventure, it was apparent that we wanted to track for sales. And it was something that I definitely had to convince my partner Bill to do, but it was something we did from day one. So as Matt said, the old adage, you can't improve what you don't measure. And so we wanted to make sure we were measuring our sales data and we had that information so that we could move forward and improve our farm progress. So the things we track total revenue per enterprise, which in Square we have programmed in as our categories. So it lines up with our expenses that we've put into our accounting software as well. Our revenue per item. So we're talking about, if we're talking about pork as a product category, then we're talking about things like bacon, pork chops, sausage as the actual item. Total number of units sold for each product. So for instance, our laying hens, we track how many dozens of eggs we sell, and we can pull that information up based on a market day or based on a market week or month or year. Number of transactions. So we can do per market or per year, and we can look at how our markets are doing and how our sales channels are doing that way. And then the average transaction value, which Matt talked about quite a bit as well. So why did we decide to use a point of sale system like Square? This system is not, I'm not a Square salesperson, but this is something that we've used because it was easily accessible. It's intuitive. It's something that I can get on my iPhone and my partner can get on his, whatever he has, Samsung Galaxy. So it's cross-platform. It's something that we can access from our computers as well so that we can make changes as we develop and we improve throughout the year. And we can pull up the data very quickly. So this is something that we have in our hands on our smartphone, and we can access when somebody asks me a question or when Bill needs to know how many dozens of eggs we sold last week so we know how many to pack for the following week. So as an example, Matt and I were traveling to a conference recently and Bill was at a market. And as we were driving, Matt said, hey, he asked me a question about our sales, and I was able to actually pull up the sales data from that day and see how Bill was doing and answer, a sales data question that Matt had on the spot. So having that information, at the click of a button is really, really pretty handy. And it makes it so that we're going to look at that information and access it a lot more than we would if we had to sit down and click on it on a computer. So we use it for general sales tracking. Obviously, we use it for credit card sales. It coalesces the data for us, so we don't have to plug things into Excel or other spreadsheets. We can pull up that data directly from the dashboard, and we can compare things from month to month or year to year so we can kind of see how our sales are tracking. So there are 3 programs that we use for Square. The first is the point of sale program, which is these are all from my iPhone. On the iPad or some sort of tablet, they would be bigger, but you can see the little squares you can click on, and this is what we use at Market. We also use the dashboard. So this is, again, when we're looking for data and we're looking for those answers, we're pulling up the dashboard on the phone and we're pulling through the menus there to get the information that we need. And then for our farm-to-door deliveries, we also use invoices, or sometimes for pre-orders, we use invoices so that we can actually have them pay in advance of Market and just pick up at Market to make things move quickly. And this is, you can use a lot of different invoicing systems. This is one that just fits for us and works well for our system.
Becca, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Dashboard is a separate app that people would need to install.
Yeah, each of these is a separate app. So you do have to install each of these separately on your tablet or your iPhone. You can get some of the same information on the point of sale app, but it's not going to be nearly as complex. You're not going to get all of it in a readable way unless you download Dashboard.
Right, and again, just for clarity, people could just use the Square app and they would be fine. But if they want to see the results like you have in the center there, then they would have to load Dashboard. Or if they
Correct.
want to create invoices, but they could. It is a standalone as well.
Correct. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so we program in categories and items so that we can look, like I said, at our enterprises, so we can find out the total amount of sales, the total amount of units. So that can be programmed in as pounds, pints, or however you're selling your item. And we can also take a look at when items are sold during the market day. So here's an example from one of our market days quite a while ago. You can see we sold 52.18 pounds of pork that day. Here's the gross revenue that we made, and we can break it down per item, which will help us determine, you know, we know approximate package size. We can kind of determine how many packages we sold. But if it were, for instance, pints of cherry tomatoes, we could see the exact number and have an idea of what we might want to bring to market the following week in order to make sure that we can meet customer demand. We also can see on the chart when things were selling. So you can see on this graph that at 10 o'clock, we sold the highest dollar amount in broiler chicken. So you can see here that, you know, right first thing in the morning, we sold the highest dollar amount in pork. And it looks like our produce peaked early in the morning. So you can kind of gauge when things are selling, and you can adapt your market sales strategy based on when items are selling. So for instance, if you were selling a lot of items first thing in the morning, the popular items, you might know that you need to reset and move some of the less popular items forward later on. So you can come up with a game plan to help move some of the less popular items a little bit earlier. So here's another comparison from, let's see, we've got Broome County Regional Market and Vestal Market. So these are 2 different locations on the same day. So you can compare market location to market location. So Bill was at one market and I was at the other. And these are 2 very different markets. And you can see how the different items sold at different times. So this is a good way to kind of look and gauge which market is doing the best for you if you're making decisions on which markets you're going to continue to attend or which markets you're going to send more product to. You can compare from location to location. And you can see the dashboard on the right, we were up 19% versus the previous Saturday, so we knew we were doing good that day. You can drill down and look at the comparisons per hour on here, how many sales you had, what the average sale was, so you can really determine how your market is performing on those individual days.
There's a question in the chat from Kathy asking, do you do anything like a grocer would do, like very large quantity packs at a lower price per pound?
We do sometimes do that. For instance, even though, Matt, we don't grow a lot of product, so we don't pile it high and watch it fly. So we have to present our stuff a little differently. So Matt's example of per pound, we actually package our potatoes in bags. So we'll do 10-pound bags of potatoes for a slightly lower price than, you know, than maybe like a pint or a quart of potatoes. And it's interesting to see how that works based on who our customers are. So one market in particular has a lot of older customers, and it's usually just them and maybe their husband or wife at home with them. So they spend the extra money and buy the smaller quantities. Whereas some of our other markets where families shop will buy the larger quantities for the less expensive price. So knowing your customers and what serves them too is important with packaging size as well. Any other questions at this point, or are we good?
I don't see any other questions, but if any more pop up, I will let you know.
Awesome, thank you. So the other thing we look at on a regular basis is the daily sales snapshot. And this is something that we pull up after almost every single market day, and it's kind of a good motivator as well. You know, and I tend to look at this during market, but my partner's superstitious, so he doesn't. But it helps us gauge what our total sales are, the average sale, the number of sales that we have, the comparison from market day to market day. So you can compare from the previous year Saturday, so 52 weeks ago, you can compare from the previous week, you can compare the previous day if you're doing markets back to back. And it also has a breakdown of cash, credit, or other payments. So if you look at the general sales summary here, you can see what the credit card fees are, how much people spent in credit cards, you know, in deliveries, they can add a tip, so you can allow that to happen, any refunds or discounts. So this is an important basic dashboard screen that you can take a look at just to gauge how things were going. Again, this is a comparison, the same location from different days. So September 4th, 2021 to August 28th, 2021. So this was 1 week apart. And then the next screen is 1 year apart. So you can see the increase in sales, the increase in sales we had, or if you have a decrease in sales. And this will come to be important in some examples that we share in a little while. But you can also take a look at the average sale, which in the average customer count, which will inform how your market days were going. The other thing we take a look at oftentimes are the transactions. And you can go through and you can look at the individual transactions for your market day. So we can take a look at whether people were buying chicken, eggs, and pork, whether they're buying just vegetables, whether they're buying beets and potatoes together, and we can determine how you set up your display and how you market your items based on those pairings. And, you know, those are some questions that I had for Matt at one point, and I think Matt had an example for our farm with, you know, people who were buying shiitakes along with other stuff were spending for $4 more, or there's some sort of example like that. And so that might make me want to put my shiitakes up front so that we can draw those people in so they also buy other products as well. Emily, did I see there was a hand raised?
There was, and then Matt let them know that you're going to answer that question in a couple of slides.
Awesome. Okay, so this is something we don't look at often, but this is something that we might look at if we have some overarching questions about what people are buying. Another aspect of Square, which we're just starting to delve into, is the customer aspect. And this is something that you have probably seen or experienced or been a part of when you're grabbing a coffee at a local coffee shop and they have a rewards program. You are programmed in as a customer if you're taking part of that rewards program, and you can use this to your benefit at the farmers market as well. This has been especially helpful for us for delivery and invoicing because we can save our customers in our Square data, and we can reuse those customers, and they're kind of part of our customer program. It can help us understand the frequency of purchases and what those customers actually purchase. so that you can serve them better. And it also provides a platform for customer feedback. So again, you know, a motivator if you want to learn how you're doing, or if you have market staff and you want to learn how they're doing. Customers do have the option to provide feedback on their digital receipt, and oftentimes they do. So that's something that you can take a look at.
Do you
So
find a lot
customer
of the
metrics,
customers use the feedback form, or do you have to ask them to use that?
if we wanted to gather more feedback, we'd probably have to ask. We probably get feedback unrequested, maybe 3 times a month during peak season, but we don't necessarily promote that that feature for our farm because, you know, one way or another, it doesn't matter. We're the only 2 people at market, so we're able to gauge that. But if you have staff, encouraging them might be a great way to do it. So some customer
I didn't know
metrics.
that you could do that.
Yeah, some customer metrics to measure. So things we want to think about. How do you define a big spender? So what is your goal? Who are the big spenders in your customer base? So you want to figure out what that is and who they are. Average customer value, so the amount of money your average customer spends in a year. So think about that. Will help you determine what kind of customers you want to encourage. And then here's some examples of some different customers that we have. These are primarily, we have one that's primarily delivery and one that was a regular market customer. And the regular market customer, if we had saved their name and programmed them in, we would have a better data set for them. But because he was using credit card for some of these sales, he was already in our system. So we can see that he bought chicken eggs 11 times and bought chicken wings 6 times. So he had 14 visits. So he was buying chicken eggs the majority of the time that he was coming to our market stand. So he is one of those customers that, you know, we knew was coming on a regular basis to buy eggs. And if we were about to sell out, we could save back a dozen so that when he showed up, we would still be able to provide him with a dozen eggs. So that's a way that we can serve this regular customer and encourage him and build that relationship and encourage him to come back and spend more with us each week. Karen, on the other hand, was a local customer that actually found us through Facebook and started to order through our farm-to-door delivery program. And we were able to serve her better. We didn't have as much face-to-face interaction with her, but we could look at this data and know what she was primarily buying and how much she was primarily spending. So when we would get a new product in that fit in with some of the things that she really liked, like we knew she liked sweet sausage. When we got bratwurst in for the first time, we could include a small pack of bratwurst into her delivery and encourage her to give that a try so that she would hopefully order more later on. And we knew she was about once a month. So, you know, if we didn't hear from her for a month or 2, you could send out an email and say, hey, we haven't heard from you. Is there anything we can do to help you out? And again, it's selling your product, but it's also serving your customer. So as Matt said with his adage, you can improve what you do measure. And with the sales project that Matt has been doing, the POS project, and our farm taking part in it, we've used this data to actually look at how changes in our markets and in our farm could be applied or have affected our farm sales. So for instance, one of our market managers sent out an email and asked if we changed Wednesday market hours, which used to be from 4 to 7, if we changed it to 3 to 6, if that would make a difference and what our thoughts and opinions were about that. And we were able to go back and say, and look at the data and determine if it actually did make a difference. So that we could provide an informed opinion and not just, hey, I think we had more customers when it was 4 to 7, but I'm not really sure. And did we actually make more money, or do we just think we did? So we were able to take a look at this and determine that it didn't really make that much of a difference in the overall scheme of things. So we were able to provide an informed decision based on the data that we collected from this Square project. And Matt, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add about this example in particular?
Well, just that, if you look here, average daily customer count really remained the same. It was 21 and it stayed at 21. So the time change didn't seem to lose them customers. Their customers spent a little bit more, but they also went through a series of price changes,
Yep.
which is important to note. So that's why the average CTS and daily sales went up a little bit. But basically, we were wondering, did the time change help or hinder the farm? And we concluded it didn't really have any impact.
So I think with these examples, one thing to point out is that not only can you change internally how you're marketing your product and how you're setting up your display and what signs you're using, but this data can also be used to help share information with market managers and other people that have, control over the larger picture, so that they have informed data as well as the individual farms. My computer. One other example if my computer decides it wants to go. There we go. So the second example was a decrease in stall size for us. So this happened last year where our stall size decreased by 1/3. And so we were able to look at the data comparison from year to year and determine if this did have an effect on our sales. And we're still trying to figure out how we're gonna change this so that we can kind of combat some of the negative influences it has. But again, this is something that we can share with our market managers so that they have, they can make informed decisions moving forward about how it impacts vendors with actual data instead of just, qualitative information. Because we can always say we think that it has impacted our sales. We think that our sales have gone down. We think our average customer count has gone down, but we're never sure. So that's basically what happened in this scenario, is that our average customer count decreased. And one of our hypotheses is that there's not as much space to be able to pull people in. So we're rethinking about how we're going to set up our stall based on this information so that we can continue to increase our customer count moving forward, so that we can kind of combat that. So those are just two very specific examples of how we've used the data and how this data has helped us kind of think about our market display and our market sales strategy moving forward, and also how it's helped inform the market policies in general as we share this information with the market managers.
So just a quick question. It looks like even though your average customer per 5 minutes went down, did your average daily sales go up?
It did, but our price increases also went up, and so that's something to consider. Yeah, so there's, I think when you look at Square data and when you look at your own Square data, you have to consider, like for instance, our average sale might have gone down over the past year, but we also had an increase in $5 a dozen eggs available. So a lot of people will buy and that's where you can look at the transaction when people are buying just $5 eggs as opposed to, a $25 roast. Things are going to change based on the inventory that you have available as well. So making sure you have the context for that. But I will say that Matt's data project has helped kind of, in the statistical models, have helped kind of take some of that and put it into a better perspective, if I'm saying that correctly.
And I'll chime in. These stats, to me, they still tell a story of a negative impact. Even though their daily sales went up by $40, they did price increases, and there's a little tiny increase in the average number of items that customers bought, but they got fewer customers as a result of the smaller stall size. And again, that was an external force, right? The market dictated stall sizes. So had they not increased prices, we would be seeing lower daily sales and lower customer counts. So, I think it still had a negative impact. You have to look across all the different numbers. Look at total items sold. They sold like a lot fewer items during the course of that season.
to a lot fewer customers.
Yep.
So it did harm their ability to earn at this market.
Were
Yep.
you able to bring that information back to the market manager and say it's harder for us to make this farmer's market profitable at a smaller scale, or was that something that was beyond their control as well?
A little bit of both, I would say. You know, a better example for something that we're actively working on right now is, you know, our market in particular just enacted a policy where they're keeping customers out of the market until opening time at 9 o'clock. Whereas previously they weren't. And so we were able to look at our sales data and say, I'm going to lose this much money because I can't sell to those early customers. So, you know, that's something that we're working with, so they can take a look at that policy and hopefully make some changes so that it can, you know, have an effect, hopefully have a positive effect. And so I think, you know, my farm in particular is sharing this information with our market managers. I think the more farms that can share this specific quantitative data with the policymakers for a lot of our markets, the better. So, and that is actually the end of my presentation. So if there are any questions, we can take those as well.
Awesome. I'm going to stop the recording.